Internet. It is yet another stirring edition of the Hardline According to Stonefruit with my unindicted co-conspirator, Mark French.
Hey, everybody.
And we are here to do our task of bringing to you the unadulterated truth about this current situation of the world. And I'm not going to lie to you, it's looking like a certain unnamed empire is going down the drain. The feeds. For example, I'll tell you how this latest at stonefruit.stack.com came about. I just started keeping a browser window of all the important things that were happening. Add a tab for a new thing, add a tab for a new thing, add a tab for a new thing. And in a month, this single browser had about 20 tabs on it.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's been a relatively momentous month.
Yeah.
So let's start out with what just passed and then circle back a few months and then come back to what we have in store over the next few months.
Sure.
I think where we start is that Xi Jinping was just in Moscow for a few days of talks, 3 days of talks. That's pretty long for a visit between two heads of
state. World leaders don't normally have that much time on their hands. That's right.
But they do if they realize that they are the architects of a rapidly changing global order. And if you will recall back to the joint statement they released just before the special military operation in Ukraine and while the Beijing Winter Olympics were going on, it was a very long and very forceful iteration of their partnership. And they said that their bilateral relationship had no limits. And I believe that's true.
Yeah.
And they had a peace offering for the Ukraine war that China offered. And Russia said, there is a lot in here that we can use as a basis for negotiation. And that fucking simpleton, who's the spokesman for a national security agency, said that, oh no, we can't consider a ceasefire because that would just ratify the gains that Russia already has.
Sure.
Which just proves that they never wanted a ceasefire, and that Secretary of Defense has said that this is a proxy war against Russia.
Yeah.
And even Mike Pence's national security guy, maybe he'll be his defense secretary or national security advisor in waiting. He testified, if Pence runs and wins, he testified before Congress that to use other people's human beings to bleed a strategic enemy, a strategic competitor like Russia is, quote, the acme of professionalism in military. And that's so profoundly cynical. I'm not surprised, but it's just so shocking how plain spoken they are in the profundity of their viciousness.
Yes.
But, I think maybe our dozens of devoted listeners probably know the score. But for those who don't, because America is the most propagandized country on the planet, let's have a little refresher course in the Ukraine war. First of all, the United States led a coup in 2014, and Victoria Nuland was caught on the phone saying who they wanted in, and they got in. And then the Bonderite Stephen Bandera, World War II Nazi collaborator, the Nazis in Ukraine that see Stephen Bandera as a spiritual forefather began killing 14,000 other Ukrainians in the Donbass,
Yeah.
which is most of the area that Russia holds now, or that they have constitutionally made a part of Russia, to be more clear.
And did hold it previously, not very long ago.
Yes. And so, some people say, oh, they're neo-Nazis. No, they're Nazi Nazis. They're direct lineal descendants of Nazis and Stephen Bandera Nazi collaboration.
Yeah.
People like CNN, they have to blur out the Bandera portraits behind the people they interview,
Yeah.
or tell their Azov battalion people to cover up their Nazi patches and tattoos.
It's a very real thing. It's not an accident that Russia already fought a war against Nazis previously.
And
That happened.
lost 25 million people,
Yeah.
a not insubstantial amount of human beings.
Yeah.
So they're understandably a little touchy about having been invaded by Napoleon and Prussia and Hitler again and again and again.
Sure.
So NATO already has nuclear capable missile sites 100 miles from the Poland border. It's a Navy Aegis system, missile system, and a similar nuclear capable site in Romania. And these can be, why are they there, Mark? To protect against ballistic missiles from Iran, which doesn't have them. Well,
Right.
they have some medium length ones, but not that can reach from Iran.
Not, yeah, it's just preposterous.
Yeah, so it's clearly directed at Russia. And
Yeah.
China and Russia have hypersonic missiles. The United States does not, but they will soon enough. And it would only take a day to turn these nuclear capable, quote unquote, defensive missile sites in Poland and Romania to offensive missile sites a day. And Putin has been very clear that this is a core security concern. If and when the United States gets hypersonic missiles and were Ukraine to ever join NATO and put such a site on the Russian border in Ukraine, Putin would have 5 or 7 minutes to decide whether or not to retaliate. And he said that's not enough time. And if Ukraine were to have joined NATO, then for sure Russia would have lost the 40-year lease it had on Sebastopol naval base in Black Sea, and that's a non-starter. And then we also need to consider the Minsk Accords, which was co-signed by France and Germany to create peace in the Donbass, where Ukraine was killing all of these other Ukrainians. And I have heard a lot of people, even one of our mutual heroes, Jeffrey Sachs, say that a recent interview from Angela Merkel said that she said that, well, we didn't really mean to uphold it. It was just to give Ukraine time to rearm and get ready to fight Russia. But the new show with Desai and Michael Hudson on Ben Norton's Geopolitical Economy Report, she says she read the German, and that's not quite what Merkel said. So pick one. But in addition to the Minsk Accords, Putin offered Ukraine a peace proposal in December 2021, and Israeli Prime Minister Bennett is on a podcast in Hebrew saying that the United States quashed a March 2022 peace proposal that Turkey had negotiated and that he was heading.
Yeah.
So these are all of the reasons that Russia has been goaded to do this. And now that they have engaged, there's no chance that the Donbass or Crimea ever return to Ukraine.
No.
And the land bridge from the Donbass to Crimea will ever be returned.
That's right.
And in the infinite wisdom of the Western security planners giving some medium range weapons to Ukraine, in his recent speech to 100,000 people in a stadium in Moscow, Putin said, "We're going to go as far into New Russia, the Donbass, and around Crimea as we need to defend it," which means they're going to take that much more of Ukrainian territory that is reachable by the missiles that the West just gave.
That's right.
So it's immensely short sighted. And what Russia has absorbed into Russia constitutionally will never be returned. They are going to take Odessa. They are going to make Ukraine a landlocked country.
Yeah.
They have the industrial areas, they have the mineral producing areas, they have much of the best farmland, and Ukraine is on the hook for all of the weaponry the United States and its few allies have sent. And BlackRock and Citigroup and all of these sharks have already signed on with Zelensky trumpeting these agreements that when the dust does settle and the war is over, that these American financial institutions are just going to pick the carcass of what tattered things remaining of value are left in Ukraine.
I mean, he's already said it publicly so repeatedly in such. I mean, it isn't much different than when Ronald Reagan won his election and the president of Merrill Lynch told him to speed it up. "I have stuff to do, buddy. Hurry up, finish what you're saying." So you have Zelensky doing the same thing for BlackRock and Goldman Sachs and Vanguard and anybody else that wants to pull a late 90s Larry Summers over there. He's already said it repeatedly. That's what the deal is.
Yeah. And I think that the model for these neocons, and I did a little background check on Newland. I didn't know that she was Strobe Talbot's chief of staff, one of Clinton's secretaries of state.
I didn't know that either.
In the 90s. And she went from Clinton to being an aide to President Cheney.
That makes perfect sense.
And then to Obama, and then to Biden. So she's a bipartisan warmonger.
Sure.
But I think their model, thinking back to Clinton again, is that they can use Ukraine to dismember Russia, and they do want to dismember it.
Yeah.
In the same way that they used NATO to dismember Yugoslavia.
Right.
But I'm willing to share a secret with you, Mark. And with our dozens of faithful listeners.
Yes.
Russia is not Yugoslavia.
Yeah. Right.
And China knows that the neocons, and neolibs, it's bipartisan. They know that that DC thinks that China is next on the chopping block. And they're just supposed to sit there, be silent, and wait for their turn to be bled. They're not going to do it.
It's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. And Xi and Putin both know what apparently Newland and the rest of these giggling psychopaths do not know. Russia is not going to lose.
Yeah.
And
full stop.
If you look at the war analysis of people that we keep tabs on, like Douglas McGregor or Scott Ritter,
sure,
it's quite obvious.
Yeah.
And the West has been ignoring Russia's legitimate security concerns long enough, poking the bear long enough. So the neoconservatives, neoliberals, the foreign policy blob of DC, they have an active fantasy life, Mark.
Yeah.
And one of their favorite fantasies is that China is about to provide weapons to Russia.
Sure.
Russia doesn't need Chinese weapons.
No, the Chinese weapons haven't even reached the point yet, except in a very few STEM microchip-based areas. Russian weapons still surpass Chinese weapons by far, 95.5% of them. So, yeah, I completely agree with you on that.
China has some good ship killer missiles that can just sink carrier groups to the bottom of the ocean, and advanced cyber warfare capacities, advanced satellite killer missile capacities. But Russia doesn't need them.
No,
Unlike, unlike the United States, Russia still has an industrial capacity.
that's right.
And because of their mixed public private economy, they can put themselves on a war footing quickly. And it's to make weapons for the use of the nation state, not to make a profit and take forever and be of bad quality,
Sure.
like America. So all Russia needs from China is for them to keep doing what they've always been doing, which is to be a market for their commodities and energy, and keep providing them with relief from American-led financial terrorism,
Hmm.
to keep the link open between China's cross-border interbank payment system with Russia's system for the transfer of financial messages, keep their Union Pay card, Chinese Union Pay card linked with Russia's Mir card, which they did in days in the week or so after the beginning of the special military operation, when MasterCard and Visa left Russia. Russia just jumped onto Union Pay. And to keep the yuan a stable currency for cross-border settlement of international trade. So Russia has seized the initiative of global leadership just over the last month. And I think to go back, to understand where this sudden momentum came from, we need to go back to the meeting she had in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, on December 9th of last year with the Gulf Cooperation Council and the Arab League. And he was like, the Arab League and the Gulf Cooperation Council were like, hail the conquering hero. They all wanted to join up forces, and was incredibly welcome.
Well, the other thing that's amazing and cool about what you just said is,
see if we can get an element.
yeah, none of them were allowed to say that. To make the United States mad early. None of it took an outsider. So they needed China to be the ones to stand at the forefront and just call a spade and begin to have that conversation.
Yeah, and the Arab League is not a small group of countries. As you can see from this map.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are in OPEC, and they're one of the most important energy producing blocks in the world. And they're all so Xi also suggested some areas that their emerging blocks and a number of are going to eventually that the financial corporation is probably the most important part. And what she really emphasized was to use the Shanghai energy uh, exchange as settle all of their energy bills in yuan. And that is going to be the knell of the petrodollar. Petrodollar, let's go to that Henry Kissinger had with the Saudi royal family in '74, a few days
Yeah.
after, a few years after America went off of the gold standard. And he said, we'll give you military protection as long as you price oil in dollars. And that worked for a long time.
It worked for a really long time.
Yeah. But, you know, the precipitous and disorganized nature of America's departure from Afghanistan was lost on no one.
Iraq, Afghanistan. Yeah, that's right.
Lost on no one, least of all Saudi Arabia.
Mm-hmm.
So while legacy media in the United States was wringing its hands and clutching its pearls about how disorganized it was, Saudi Arabia signed a military cooperation agreement with Russia. And a few months after that October meeting last year with the Arab League and Gulf Cooperation Council, the Chinese foreign minister, Qin Gang, and the Arab League Secretary General met in Cairo in January 15th of this year to say, all right, let's keep the momentum up on our agreements. And a few days later, the Saudi finance minister in Davos, Switzerland, where the elite meet to plan our futures, Mark French.
They certainly do.
Not for long, with renegade media like ours. But at Davos, the Saudi finance minister said, we're willing to take payments in oil in currencies other than the dollar. And that, and the Shanghai Energy Exchange as the mechanism for it all to settle is colossal. And they already have done a test pilot of the digital yuan, working with the central monetary authorities of Singapore and the United Arab Emirates to see how the digital yuan can work for cross-border trade settlement. And in September and October of last year, it worked fine for $20 million worth of exchange. So we have the proof of concept in hand.
They're going to be able to add more zeros very quickly.
That's all it is. Once you've proved that it's possible,
it's going to happen.
But that's not the only thing that they're doing, creating an alternative to the dollar. And in our previous interaction, Mr. French, we talked about some of the other currencies that are in the offing.
Yeah.
BRICS potentially having a 5R currency for their international trade, because the first letter of all of the BRICS currencies is R. Brazilian real, Russian ruble, Indian rupee, South African rand. Let's see who else. And the gold, there'll be a gold-backed central bank digital currency between Iran and Russia for their own international north-south transportation corridor, which will bring a lot of Indian products to Europe as well without having to go so much further through the Suez Canal.
Yeah, well, and then you have the entirety of the Caribbean and South America that aren't exactly enamored by further American engagement either. Like they're also coming together. I mean, you have Republicans in the United States calling to invade Mexico because Americans want to keep getting high on heroin and OxyContin. Like, why is it any other country's responsibility that Americans are so stressed out and depressed they want to keep getting high on stuff? So like you literally have the call to invade Mexico, And Obrador is like, I'm sorry, this is a little bit too hostile, even for us. We're going to start going in another direction.
Yeah. AMLO said, we're not a colony.
We are not a colony. A quote. That was a direct quote. We are not a colony of you. We're an independent country, and we will act as such.
And they want to join the BRICS.
Yeah.
We'll get the BRICS expansion later, but the LA conference of Latin American countries last year was a fiasco.
Yeah.
Because they wouldn't let in Nicaragua, Cuba, and Venezuela. And a lot of Latin American countries said, you don't invite them, we send someone below our head of state to represent us, just to register our distaste. Meanwhile, they're allowing dictators of their choosing to come to that conference. And if they have any more conferences with Latin America, they're going to be equally a fiasco. So there are other things that China is doing to provide the world with concrete, mutually beneficial reasons for joining their emerging power bloc. And lately they've just been coming one after another
so fast
in quick succession.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the Belt and Road, that's ongoing. That's their ongoing development offer. And to show they got some muscle, they had some joint military exercises off of Durban, South Africa, with Russia, South Africa, and China. And China and Russia and Iran just had operations in the Persian Gulf, military operations. This one was awesome, Mark. February 20, so they have their exercises February 18th. Listen to how quickly these all come. They have military operations February 18th. They float their ideological offer on February 20th. U.S. hegemony and its perils. And my God, I read it. It could have been written by some asshole Marxist college professor. Because it's really I am an asshole Marxist and an anarchist, so I say that with love. But really, it's a systematic and thorough indictment of the entire history of American ill will towards humanity,
sure,
peace. It's amazing.
Yeah,
how succinct and systematic it is, but yet it's not that succinct. It's pretty long. And then, boom, 2 days later, February 22, they issue a global security initiative concept paper. So Belt and Road, the development offer, U.S. hegemony and its perils. Join us for these ideological reasons, the ideological offer. Security paper, that's the security offer. And what are their security objectives? Win-win cooperation, the identity of security and development,
sure,
upholding the authority of the UN as the central mechanism and platform for global security.
Yeah.
An end to the Cold War mentality of unilateralism and bloc confrontation and hegemonism.
Mm-hmm.
It's so clear and so because while America had its unipolar moment from the fall of the Soviet Union until the 20-teens, there was no other game in town. There was no one the global South or developing world could turn to. There is now.
Yeah. And going to be.
Yeah. And also in February of this year, February 18th, at the Munich Security Conference, which is a horseshit cheerleading forum for the so-called rules-based order, which is, as Ben Norton calls it, a situation where America makes the rules and orders everyone around.
Yeah.
Because rules can change. Rules are not explicit. Rules provide no guidance. International law does. And China knows that if the nation states of the world agree to follow international law, China's going to do fine.
Mm-hmm.
And China recently elevated their foreign minister to the Politburo, which is pretty huge
Sure.
in terms of the power that it gives him as a person and the power that it gives how they think that their interactions in the world need some significant representation in the Politburo. So he is now their senior diplomat, but he's as a member of the Politburo. There's another new guy who's the foreign minister. So they sent their Politburo former foreign minister guy to the Munich Security Conference, Wang Yi. And he delivered a talk, everything China has done for peace, or is for peace. Here's a quote. Some people do not want peace talks to succeed or the fighting to stop. They don't care about the life and death of Ukrainians or the harm done to Europe, but have larger strategic calculations in mind.
I mean, who else could he be possibly be talking about besides the United States, Germany, and Britain? I mean, it's blatant with the United States at the head.
Yeah, and during the meeting between Xi and Putin just lately, Putin said, "We're ready to talk as soon as we get any indications from the West that they are too, but we don't have any indications now."
Right.
Yeah. So also February, just a few days later, 24th, 25th, the G20 finance ministers all met in Bangalore, India. And again, Blank Fine tried to turn it into a cheerleading anti-Russia in Ukraine meeting. And China and Russia said, no, that we're not going to have a unified communique if it mentions war in Ukraine. And a lot of the G7 members said, this is a finance meeting, not a security meeting. Don't hijack it. And then there was a report from the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Now, mind you, this is a ghoul shop. They get money from the Australian government and America and the war machine generally. So they have a vested interest in scaring the fuck out of Australia.
Yeah.
But there's a chart at stonefruit.substack.com of all of these advanced technologies that China's in the forefront of: advanced materials and manufacturing, AI, computing, energy, quantum, biosensing, you name it. And that accords with their Made in China 2025 industrial policies of several years ago. And then Mr. French, she gets a third 5-year term as chairman. He has a lot of titles, but as the man, as the guy.
Yeah.
On March 9th. And the rhetoric at that conference, this is all within a month. We're still only at May 9th. The rhetoric at that conference was a real departure from some countries do X, Y, and Z and all of these gentle metaphors. She just said outright, Western countries led by the United States have implemented all around containment and suppression against us, bringing unprecedentedly severe challenges to our country's development. Boom. And then their new foreign minister, not the Politburo guy, this fellow is called Qin Gang.
Mm-hmm.
And he brought up wolf warrior diplomacy. Wolf Warrior is, I believe, and the sequel, Wolf Warrior 2, I believe is the highest grossing film of all time now. And it shows a Chinese ask a la Rambo or Arnie and all these action movies from the 80s, uh, kicking ass and taking names in Africa against some American mercenaries. So,
Oh,
yeah.
sure.
And China loved to see China kicking ass and taking names. And Western capitals greeted the naming of Qinggang to foreign minister as, oh, the wolf warrior diplomat has arrived. But it's called two sessions in China where they choose their leadership. At two sessions, he said, wolf warrior diplomacy, that's not what we're about. And he said, quote, Confucius said over 2,000 years ago that kindness should be repaid with kindness, and that enmity should be repaid with justice.
Right.
China's diplomacy is full of kindness and benevolence, but when the wolves get in our way and attack, Chinese diplomats must dance with the wolves to protect their country.
Mm-hmm.
That's some we're not taking this shit anymore type of language.
Yeah.
China's never spoken like this before.
No.
And right on the heels after their security paper and the US says, and its US hegemony and its perils paper, they're just broadcasting that, look,
we're just trying to do business and feed our people. Yeah.
You've been waiting for a new era to arrive. It's arrived.
Yeah.
And we're going to change our rhetoric. We're going to drop all of these offers on the table for the rest of the country to bypass US to take as they will. So China made an agreement with Saudi Aramco in March 2021 that Saudi would prioritize China for energy for the next 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
China and Iran signed a similar 25-year deal in the same month. So I think it was the combination of China saying, look, guys, we don't want to choose sides. I think the factoid is 40% of our energy out of the Persian Gulf. And if you want to join the BRICS, you guys got to play nice. So building on these accords and that December meeting with the Gulf and Arab countries, and the January, let's hit the gas accelerator from the chair of the Arab League and the Chinese minister stroke.
Yeah.
March 10, rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia.
Sure.
Mike.
Yeah.
And for that one, they didn't send their foreign minister. For that one, they sent Wang Yi. They sent their Politburo member. They sent their top foreign diplomat. And, the joint statement is kind of anodyne, but what it implies is Earth is transformative. It's a paradigm shift of the very first order of magnitude. Then we got Belt and Road, which we've discussed numerous times. I had always been using a figure of 144 countries, and now I see research that it's up to 147 or 152. Mark, there's only 193 countries at the UN.
Recognizes. Sure.
Yeah, there's 193 countries at the UN, and China has signed Belt and Road with 152 of them. That's a third of world trade and GDP and 60% of the world's population.
Sure.
And by setting up the digital yuan and these other currencies, alternatives to SWIFT, alternative financing mechanisms like the China's Asia Infrastructure Development Bank and the BRICS New Development Bank, they don't need to fight America. They just need to operationalize these alternative parallel arrangements.
Yeah. I would take it even further. I would take it a little bit further. I would say from what I've seen so far, America doesn't have soft power anymore. The way they got away with this stuff for so long was because of the hope and dream and soft power that we spread. Now the spreading of democracy just means you're going to have to watch your kids starve. We're going to sanction you. And if you don't like that, then we're going to bomb you. That doesn't go over as well as French fries and Levi's and hot rods. People are going to choose not being sanctioned, not being bombed, and not watching their kids starve and being able to get medicine when they need it over the idea of maybe someday getting invited to an American country club. That's really, I mean, it's really getting delineated that vulgarly at this point.
Yeah, America has traditionally had a very significant advantage from its soft power, particularly from its cultural soft power and the dream factory of Los Angeles. And China, frankly, does not.
Right.
And they have said that their model of development is not really readily reproducible because China is such a unique country. And I think that is in large part true. But their transactional attitude towards foreign relations and their identification of security with development and their emphasis on international law and infrastructure development, that's soft power enough. That's economic power.
Yeah.
That is a more than adequate replacement for the soft power that it doesn't really have.
Absolutely.
But I think one of the leading indicators that I don't think we're really seeing yet, but I'd be curious when we do, is still very substantial immigration into America.
Mm-hmm.
I'm waiting for that moment when people just don't want to come here anymore. And
Yeah, no, that's a good point. But we've mucked things up so bad in the countries that the people are coming from. We've basically given them no choice, and then the United States' answer is completely the opposite and antithesis of the Statue of Liberty. We're going the opposite direction now and saying, we don't care how bad we're making your own neighborhoods, you have to stay there. Don't come here.
yeah, that irresistible political genius, Kamala Harris.
Oh man.
Don't come.
Don't come here. Right.
Or I saw her on the Colbert Show, where Colbert, archetype of a shit lib,
Yeah, right.
and he's giving her a softball, and she's answering like, the concern we have is the concern that we all have about the thing that we need to do that causes the concerns.
Yeah, she literally said the word concern 4 times in 2 sentences.
Please,
We should
please
all
have
definitely be concerned about the things in the areas that we have concerns. It's like you didn't even say anything again.
and there's absolutely no bench on the Democratic side
Zero.
at all. Buttigieg, who took two and is proving he's absolutely worthless in East Palestine. I mean, we're
South
sitting.
Bend, Indiana. South Bend, Indiana is not that big of a town. It's really not. And he couldn't even be the mayor of that place very well.
I
I
mean,
mean,
being fair in
I've never seen a person fail up faster than that guy.
a small town mayor, fix your potholes, stuff like that. Potholes, for
Couldn't do it.
example, are notorious in South Bend.
Yeah.
You know what always tripped me out? When I learned this, I was, holy shit. His son was the guy that introduced uh, Antonio Gramsci, the greatest intellectual Marxist of theoretician of the 20th century.
Yeah, his
His
dad.
dad,
Yeah.
his dad was the guy that introduced Gramsci to the English-speaking world.
Yeah.
Boy, that fruit fell pretty far from the tree.
Yeah.
And same with Kamala. Her dad is a radical agronomist
Right.
from Jamaica, I believe. And he said, I can't vouchsafe her political perspective at all.
Because she has no political perspective other than her own aggrandizement. I don't think she feels strongly about anything on the planet Earth.
Oh my God, she's a Howard alumni, and Howard was in March Madness. She gave them a
Yeah.
pep talk when they lost. Oh, it was so painful.
Yeah, that was an embarrassing speech.
Oh my
The
God.
kids were really uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's like
They were like, yeah, this is our reward for winning.
and so okay, if Harris and Buttigieg aren't good enough, the great white knight is Gavin Newsom. There's nothing. And Newsom was raised by the God, which dynasty family was he raised by? Not the
Oh,
Manning.
I don't know. I know he's has a very serious real estate conglomerate backing.
Yeah, and he was one of the people that urged the Biden administration to bail out the Silicon Valley Bank.
Of course he was. Those are
Without
his donors.
there is donors, without telling the administration that he had a lot of loans for his vineyards with Silicon Valley Bank.
Yeah, I wonder what Pelosi and her husband were up to with the SVB.
And Ro Khanna, because Pelosi and Ro
Mm-hmm.
Khanna kind of share Silicon Valley to an extent. I think
Well,
Ro
Ro Khanna, I think, was a Google guy at some point. Like he actually was with one of those firms
does not
at
surprise
some
me.
point. I'm almost certain.
I think his district has a bit more of Silicon Valley than Pelosi's district.
That's right.
And he did fundraisers with David Sachs. I think that's his name, the former CEO of Silicon Valley Bank. And he's saying, "Oh, we need to bail out every depositor."
Yeah.
When he did fundraisers with the CEO, Silicon Valley Bank and the banking collapse that is just barely beginning to start is another podcast. So let's stick with China as the new hegemon, or not hegemon, because hey, join us, fine, don't, fine, but our offer's pretty good. So beyond just Belt and Road, then they also got the BRICS. And I saw one analysis of BRICS Plus that studied who might be joining soon and why they're plausible. One group are the people that were invited to the 2017 BRICS summit: Egypt, Kenya, Tajikistan, Mexico, Thailand. And whose foreign minister, the BRICS foreign ministers had a meeting May 2022. Before that year's following BRICS summit, who was invited to that one? Foreign ministers meeting: Argentina, Egypt, Indonesia, Kazakhstan, Nigeria, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Senegal, Thailand. And then who did they propose out of G20 to be invited? Argentina again, Indonesia again, Mexico again, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. I think keeping the geographic mix relatively even and throwing in these extremely substantial middle range powers and regional powers and countries that kind of straddle East and West in important ways, uh, like Turkey, member of NATO, yet mostly in Asia. Or
And not only that, but debt denominated in dollars, which they're no longer interested in servicing. There's no reward there.
and which bank bought the most gold in 2022? Turkey's,
Mm-hmm.
followed by China, followed by India, and then a lot of the Central Asian countries that are members of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, led by China, of which India is also a member, and Russia are members. They bought gold. Small, because they're small countries, but for their size, and implying to me that the BRICS countries, the Shanghai or potential BRICS countries, and the Shanghai Cooperation countries, they're all up on gold so that they can be a meaningful participant in new currencies that I think are about to start popping off. So let's look at these middle range powers for a second as possible new members of BRICS. Egypt, because they're going to need more members from Africa. Egypt's a big likely one. Algeria, one of the leading gas exporters in Asia, like we mentioned, Indonesia, Thailand. Thailand was a member of some of the digital currency, central bank digital currency prototypes between China and some of its other partner countries that then led to Project Mbridge and Project Dunbar that are partnered with China, UAE, and Singapore to bring the digital yuan into real commercial life. But before Mbridge and Project Dunbar, Thailand was a partner in in the bilateral prototypes of these digital platforms. So it's not just that they're an important country in ASEAN, which they are, but that they're also really on the bleeding edge of financial fintech development. So, and also Lavrov recently said that over a dozen countries have asked to join: Algeria, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Egypt, Afghanistan. We talked about this in our pregame. Good Lord. I read the part of the Afghanistan papers that Washington Post released in a painful, rare episode of Washington Post committing actual journalism.
Yeah.
And from the first few months on, they had no idea why they were there, what the exit strategy was, and what even to target. I mean, say what you will about Colin Powell, I think he unfairly has a good reputation, but the Powell doctrine of Gulf War 1.0 of have have a political objective, use overwhelming force, and have a very clear exit strategy. That that should be the basis of any foreign entanglement.
Sure.
I mean, I think all America has now to is war, but good Lord, if you can't at least do that, don't send anyone overseas.
Yeah.
Speaking of overseas, besides immigration as a leading indicator of when the world just gives up on America,
Sure.
if China has 152 other partners out of 193 countries, that's a lot. And the United States also has over over 800 bases in military bases in over 100 countries. So I think there's a real Venn diagram overlap countries that have signed on to the Belt and Road Initiative and also have American bases.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I could foresee a time when China says, look, you want to be in Belt and Road, get rid of your US bases. But I think China's intensely pragmatic and is not in any rush for that. You know, let's speak about Chinese pragmatism for a second. Mark, why are the neocons so convinced China's about to invade Taiwan? Can you answer me that?
No.
They, they waited, they have a phrase, 100 years of humiliation from the UK-led opium wars
Yeah.
until they finally declared the People's Republic of China. That was 100 years of being laid prostrate by the
Yeah.
West,
Hmm.
and they're still really fucking bitter about it.
And previously by the Japanese.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Opium Wars was all the Western European powers. Then Japan took Manchuria, and the rape of Nanking is not forgotten.
Yeah.
All of that. But they have, and then they won't shut up about their 5,000 years of history, and it's not incorrect. But the point being, they have a long memory and they play the long game. So they're not in a rush to invade Taiwan.
No.
They can wait. They're each other's most important trading partners. PRC has billions of dollars of foreign direct investment in Taiwan. I think they're the biggest foreign source of foreign direct investment in Taiwan. Why the fuck would they want to invade? They have no plans to invade
They have no reason to.
at all. Although I saw China just shoot away an American warship in the South China Sea. So let's see. That's the BRIC and US hegemony and its perils. And there was a freight train that just left from Beijing to Moscow on March 16th. That's the first Beijing to Moscow direct freight train service. That's huge. That's the operationalization of Belt and Road. There it is. It's just begun. Their first freight train service. Boom. So the infrastructure's been laid. Now the trains are literally leaving the station. So much in just a month. And what is the
It's going to go
response?
faster.
Now
Yeah.
everything's late.
When things happen fast like this, it seems like it's taken forever, but it only gets faster. Anything that you read or hear or see that actually happens was planned years ago. This is going to start happening. The relationships are only going to grow faster now. It's already set in motion. There's no unspinning this.
Chinese digital yuan infrastructure, fintech infrastructure, proven, ready to scale. Belt and Road, Eurasian infrastructure laid down. Trains right now halfway between Beijing and Moscow. Extremely ramped up rhetoric saying, US, quit being such an international douchebag. Very heavy statements like US hegemony and its perils. The offer to join a global security understanding. The desire to use existing formats like the UN and international law as written now. The dollar has fell about 10% in a decade, roughly, as a percentage of global reserves. And so you may be moving forward, the dollar will continue to decline as a global reserve currency at that same slow and steady pace. Maybe so, or maybe it starts to become a rush away from the dollar. Especially when I think that the Fed and Treasury's only response to having obligated themselves to bail out every depositor in the banking system is going to be to print money and make inflation skyrocket. Then no one's going to want our T-bills, and they're going to join all the EU yuan and all these other burgeoning new currencies that are to pop. And what's America's response? A couple generals saying we're going to be at war by 2025, 2026 with Asia, with China. Because they know that's when when Chinese military capacity reach escape velocity that America can't respond, even militarily. They know they have to, if they want to do it militarily, which the doomsday clock is closer to midnight than it's ever been before. And midnight means nuclear bombs go poof, and all die. That's the only thing that American planners can consider, kinetic war. Or, since the Republicans just took over the House and they have a new select committee on China, and they're just saying we need to go. The chair, Mike Gallagher of Wisconsin, he said that this is an existential quote. This is an existential struggle over what life will look like in the 21st century. Our most fundamental freedoms are at stake. No, they're not. No, they're not. What freedoms anyway? Democracy doesn't exist except for the pageant of elections. So I reckon that the Mickey Mac, Ray McGovern's great conceptual model of the military, industrial, congressional, intelligence, media, academia, think tank complex. And we should do we need to expand the Mickey Mac to include big tech and Wall Street, because military industrial, we don't really have an industrial capacity anymore.
Right.
For example, remember in the 50s, what's good for General Motors is good for the United States. America makes more money from GM makes more money from financing its cars than it does from producing and selling from producing its cars.
Yeah.
So even the tattered remnants of America's industrial base are themselves financialized.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I think we need to add big tech to McGovern's Mickey Mac is because let's take 2012 as kind of a magic year. That's when Facebook had its initial offering. That's right around when the youth all had cell phones, the universal cell phones in America.
Sure.
And we've seen through the Twitter files that the federal alphabet soup agencies have conspired with Twitter and Facebook and Alphabet and the rest of big tech. From what began as counterterrorism is now counterpopulism and using big tech for narrative management.
Right.
And using big tech as a essential partner for narrative management as a system of social control. Why we need to add big tech to the Mickey Mac. But the people in the Beltway bubble and in the Mickey Mac are so insular that they just continue to obstinately, aggressively, hyper destructively, willfully mismanage China's very clear and straightforward and often stated goals of they just want to do trade and provide win-win opportunities for international cooperation and feed their omnivorous appetite for food and energy and export, now that they're up the value manufacturing chain, and to export their products to markets and to start using ASEAN countries and Africa for manufacturing areas beneath what they have graduated to on the value chain of manufacturing. So, Mark, DC doesn't know that they're in checkmate already.
No, not at all. It's actually going the opposite direction.
In fact, there's a line from Zbigniew Brzezinski's The Grand Chessboard, which is a hell of an instruction manual on how to do imperialism.
Yeah.
American imperialism. There's a quote there that said, potentially the worst possible combination is Russia, China, and Iran as a counter-hegemonic bloc with a litany of shared grievances. Well,
we gave them all the grievances.
Yeah, I mean,
that didn't take very long.
Not just America and UK colluding to overthrow Mossadegh in 1953.
Sure. Yeah.
Or being so horrible to Iran in so many ways for decades. But just lately, China brokered the agreement between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Russia and Iran just combined their bank messaging systems. Iran and China and Russia just had military exercises in the Persian Gulf. A couple other examples. The exact Russia, China, Iran axis that so worried Brzezinski has occurred.
Kissinger. Yeah.
Has occurred. Yeah, Brzezinski is the Kissinger for the Democratic Party. That's how I like to call it. So that's kind of where we are now. But what's let's have a gander. Ministers of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization are going to Goa, India, on May 4th and 5th of the year. Iran, Gulf Cooperation Council, and China will be meeting in Beijing later this year. And the 15th BRIC Summit is going to occur in Durban, South Africa in late August. So these fucking yo-yos in the Beltway bubble thought that they were really witty. We're going to turn the ruble into ruble. You see what we did there, Mark? It's alliteration. They're both are. So boot Russia off of SWIFT, steal $300 billion worth of Russian foreign currency reserves in gold. And what happened? The ruble was the best performing currency last year. Dollar de-dollarization radically accelerated and is not stopping. The U.S. is on the precipice of, I think, a financial crisis that will dwarf 2008.
Oh, yeah.
This is going to be the one that brings the American economy down, and we have completely new financial environment in the United States.
Well, this one's
I
bubble
think,
everything. There's nothing to backstop it.
yeah,
08, they blamed it all on real estate. But then they just took the same model that they used for that one and they just derivative bubbled everything like an aquarium. There's nothing to backstop it this time.
what do you think some of the main symptoms of the crash this time might be?
Uh, well, you're already seeing exploding rents when normal working and poor people don't have any money and they don't have serious jobs. And now we're entering a weird period of inflation. And I don't see how the bourgeois and the upper middle class didn't see this coming already. The reason that none of their attacking of the working class is going to slow down inflation is because there's only one group of people left to take anything from. You can't squeeze blood from a turnip. The only people that have anything left to take anything is the upper middle class. It's all these highly educated, so their costs for everything are just going to continue to explode. And then because when people got scared of their market positions, they hedged with this explosion. It's not an accident that BlackRock is the largest owner of single family residences in the United States right now. And that's been going on for a long time. I think when I first started doing single family residence flips in the Dallas Fort Worth area, BlackRock was already buying stuff. We were in a race with them to buy things here. And that was 13 years ago. So what you're going to see is just this war on the other. They'll blame it on anything. They'll blame it on Russia. They'll blame it on China. They'll blame it on the border. They'll blame it on poor people in the ghetto. They'll blame it on workers want too much money. Inflation, when you look at the actual math right now, really only 8% of it is worker compensation salary based. That's not where it's coming from at all. So because 54% of the inflation is all in these ridiculous inflated assets, the symptoms that you're just going to see is a total breakdown at the lower levels. You can't stitch this fabric together any longer. If we're going to say on the news every night, inflation's bad, so we're going to continue to put millions of people out of work, that isn't going to do anything but lead to more monopoly and consolidation. So the very symptoms that you're trying to fix from monopoly, from inflated assets, you're going to have gasoline thrown on that fire. So it'll put it out maybe for a quarter or two at a time, depending on the sector. But as that begins to fray and catch on fire and frazzle, the downturns and the stresses are going to get uglier and uglier and uglier. What you're going to see immediately is what in the hell is going to happen with this commercial real estate bubble. Yeah. There are so many millions of square feet in fancy glass towers that were overbuilt that are not meant for normal people and serve no purpose whatsoever. That's going to have to come off the books or get repurposed at some point. And they're just not going to be, they're either not going to be able to willing to deal with it in a meaningful way, or they're not going to deal with it fast enough. So it's going to be freaky, weird stuff like that that really starts to come to the fore here in very short order.
Yeah, I see a bubble popping commercial and residential real estate as well. I think maybe a 30% price correction. Uh, I see them printing money to backstop avalanche of collapses,
Mm-hmm.
which is going to contribute to more inflation and uh, more inflation and yeah, and so I think the only hedges are the traditional ones of gold and silver, and there is some indication that the UAE dirham and the what's the other one? The Singapore dollar may be utilized in the basket of currencies that becomes the BRIC 5-bar currency. So getting out of dollar denominated assets also seems like a good idea. So I think that's about where we are. And Series 1 savings bond at Treasury Direct are already at 6.89. I think we're going to see the continued elevation of Treasury returns because no one's going to want them anymore.
Yeah.
So we're at 116, my man Mark French. I think that's a good place to leave it on that dour note.
I think it should always end on a dour note. Just for posterity's sake.
America has solutionitis. Buy junk silver rounds, buy coins from 1964 and earlier, gold, and wait out the storm. This has been
That's
another
funny.
stirring edition of the Hardline According to Stonefruit with my mega ace, Mark French. Peace out, people of the interwebs.